Hi, it's so good to meet you.
Yeah. There we go.
Yeah! Oh, perfect. Full screen.
You got it.
Oh, hey, cuties.
Hello.
So, Rachel, what words do you use to describe your limb difference? What words do you use to describe or name your limb difference? What words do you use to describe your limb difference?
Ooh, that's a great question. The words that I use to describe my limb difference are, when I'm like introduced or explaining it to someone, I'll say that I was just born missing the lower half of my right arm. That's what I always just say. And then I go into, it's a limb difference, and kind of explain to them. But I really just say I'm missing the lower half of my right arm. I kind of hope that explains it enough for them, but sometimes they want to know more and more, and I just say I was born like that. Most of the time I just say that I was born like that.
Since I'm a teacher, I say what it is. I was born with amniotic band syndrome, which means my hands look like this. Depending on, who it is or what other questions follow, I'll either explain in more detail what happened, or I'll, just kind of leave it at that.
Little arm.
Hi. Hi, little arm.
I usually just call it my lucky fin or my limb difference. I don't really have a specific individual name for it.
Mine, I've changed so much over my life. When I was little, I would call it my usually lefty or my baby hand when I was young, but now I'm like stump baby. Which doesn't work for everyone, but for me it works.
A lot of people like to call it stump. You're a stump. I'm not a stumper. I had a doctor who kept calling it that, and every time I was like, I'm a tree. Like me and yoga mind, I'm like, tree pose. Stump.
I guess formally I would describe it as having a congenital limb deficiency, but for most people I'll just say, oh, I was just born without my hand. I usually call it my nub. That's my go-to word for that. Sometimes I use stump depending on how I'm feeling that day.
The words I use for my limb difference, I say amputee. I say that I have a stump, so my left leg is amputated above the knee. Stump is my go-to. People in my life call it my magic leg or my little leg. Technically, I think it's called residual limb, which just sounds like residue. I've never liked that. But I think maybe that's because it was surgical. I lost my leg when I was 13. I don't know if congenital amputees have residual limbs because it's not left over from something. I also use the word disabled. That's my preference over a person with a disability, just because it's, for me, just an integral part of of who I am. And also disabled is just not a bad word.
I use the word my hand. I say sometimes my little hand. Sometimes I'll call it a palm. I really struggle with how to describe it in the sense where it's I'm missing fingers. So I'm really trying to find what are more not positive, but ways to describe that where I'm not lacking something. Has been sort of intentional language I've been thinking about recently. But for the most part, I'll just say my hand or limb difference. And then recently I have been taking on the word disability in the sense that it's this, I'm a part of this larger community in being someone with a disability and what that means and sort of the stigma that all faces too.
I use the correct terms like everybody else, the thrombocytopenia absent radius or TAR syndrome. A lot of friends, I use T-Rex arms with little children because it's self-explanatory.
I just describe it as my arm, or I just talk about it as my limb difference, something that I really didn't do in the past.
Typically, I'm very clinical. I just say I have syndactyly. Technically, I have brachysyndactyly, a term that I've just sort of learned about. So I don't use it when I probably should, but normally, syndactyly.
I just say my arms. Because of my introduction to the Lucky Fins, I've been using nubs a little bit, but not too much.
Well, number one would be congenital amputation if we're looking at it scientifically. That's the most concise way to put it. I say that it's my little arm or my paw. Call it my paw the most. People seem to get a kick out of that.
I call it a nubbin. You should probably made a video of someone saying that, they like calling it a nubbin.
And I don't really call it anything else except for a nubbin.
I usually use Little Hand, Stump, Rosie Jojo, that's what I named her. But yeah, I'm good with lots of different language.
Well, I use my little arm, or fin, is pretty much what I use to describe my little arm. I say little arm, I think, more than anything else. It's just so cute and small.
So this is Nubby, my nub. Yes, Nubby is a little bit of my forearm, and I can like put pressure on Nubby when I do yoga. So I kind of like do a lot of forearm stuff and forearm plank, and my down dog is different. Like I just kind of adapted to wherever I need to go, and I just kind of, hang out with Nubby.
I use Little Arm now because of Ashley. For my leg, I would probably say Stump because it's like a good solid leg and it's stumpy. I guess because there was a foot there, it feels more stumpy than like Ashley's arm, which is a little arm. Because it's a little arm, it's literally a little stuff.
Yeah. I've always called it my little arm. I don't know, Stump has never felt right to me. For some reason, to me, Stump feels like something that is larger than what I have. And mine is just like just a very small residual limb, so little arm has always felt right.